The courtroom was still buzzing with whispers, but Jaden wasn't listening. He had already shared the hardest part of his story. Now he was ready to reveal the rest. He took a deep breath and started speaking again, his voice quieter this time. I used to live in an apartment with my mom. It wasn't big, and it wasn't nice, but it was home. Jaden paused for a moment, his eyes flickering to the judge. The room had gone silent. No one was laughing now. Everyone was listening. My mom, she was always there. She worked every day, cleaning, cooking, whatever she could find to make sure we had something to eat. But when I was little, I didn't understand what it really meant for her. She worked too much, and she was tired all the time. She used to tell me everything was fine. Jaden's hands gripped the edge of the witness stand, his knuckles turning white. But one day, my mom got really sick. At first, I thought it was just a cold. She said she was okay, but she wasn't. She couldn't get out of bed. She couldn't even make me breakfast anymore. His voice cracked a little as he went on. I remember the last time she told me, "Jaden, you have to be strong. I'm just a little tired." But she wasn't just tired. She was getting weaker every day, and I didn't know what to do. There was no money to take her to the hospital, no one to help. The courtroom was completely still now, the only sound the faint rustle of paper. I stayed home from school that week. I didn't know what was happening, but I could see my mom was getting worse. She wouldn't even let me go get food for us. I just stayed beside her. Jaden's eyes started to water, but he quickly wiped them away. One night, she stopped talking. She didn't even move. I didn't know what to do. I tried calling an ambulance, but there was no one who could come. It was too late. She was already gone by the time the morning came. He paused, the weight of his words hanging in the air. When she died, I was alone. I didn't know what to do. The apartment was so quiet. I had no one to talk to, no one to help me. The neighbors didn't even know she was gone. It felt like no one cared. Jaden took another deep breath, trying to steady himself. That day, I didn't know what was going to happen next. The world felt like it stopped moving. I had no food, no money, and no family. I didn't know how I was going to survive. But I was alone now. His words hung in the room. Everyone could feel the pain behind them. Jaden's mother wasn't just another name in the news. She was his mother, and no one had cared enough to help her. Jaden looked down at the floor for a moment before lifting his head and speaking again, his voice firm this time. I didn't want to steal, but I had to. I had no choice. When you're starving, you do things you never thought you would. That's what happened. I didn't want to be a criminal. I just wanted to survive. He looked around the room, his eyes meeting the judge's for a moment. That's why I stole. Not because I'm bad, but because I was hungry, and because I had no one. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear a pin drop. For the first time, people weren't laughing. They were listening. The judge looked at Jaden, his face softening, as if he was seeing the boy for who he really was, not just a criminal, but a child who had lost everything. Jaden's life had changed that night. The apartment was empty now, just like his stomach. But worse than the hunger was the loneliness. He could hear the echo of his mother's voice in his mind, telling him everything would be okay. But it wasn't. The next few days were a blur. Jaden wandered the streets, unsure of where to go or what to do. He wasn't a child anymore. He had learned quickly how cruel the world could be. The cold air bit at his skin as he walked, but he didn't feel it. He was numb. The city was busy, but Jaden felt invisible. People walked by without even noticing him. He was just another face in the crowd, a boy who didn't belong. But he didn't care. He needed food. He needed help, and no one was going to give it to him. He found a small park near the edge of the city. It wasn't much, but it was quiet. He sat on the ground, his stomach growling with hunger, his hands trembling from the cold. He thought about his mom. She would have made him a warm meal, maybe even a cup of tea. but there was no one left to care for him. As he sat there, a man approached. He was old, his clothes ragged, but there was something kind about his eyes. He looked at Jaden and smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He knew what it was like to be hungry, to be alone. "You all right, kid?" the man asked, his voice gruff but soft. Jaden nodded, though he didn't feel all right. He didn't want to talk, didn't want to explain that he had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The man sat down beside him, his old bones creaking as he settled onto the bench. "You hungry?" the man asked after a long silence. Jaden didn't answer at first. He didn't know what to say. Yes, he was hungry, but he didn't want to ask for help. But the man didn't wait for an answer. He pulled out a small brown bag from his coat and handed it to Jaden. "I've got some bread and water. It's not much, but it's something," the man said. Jaden stared at the bag for a moment, unsure. He had never accepted food from a stranger before, but his stomach was empty, and the cold was beginning to hurt. He reached out slowly and took the bag. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice soft but full of gratitude. The man nodded. "Don't mention it, kid. Just remember, don't let the world take away your kindness, no matter how tough things get." Jaden didn't understand the man's words fully, but he felt a strange sense of peace when he said them. It was as if, for a moment, the world wasn't so cold. Maybe there was still some kindness left in it, but the moment was short-lived. After Jaden ate the small meal, the man stood up, his knees cracking as he rose. "Stay strong, little brother," the man said before he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the city. Jaden sat there for a while longer, the warmth of the bread still lingering in his stomach. But the emptiness inside him remained. The man had been kind, but Jaden knew kindness wasn't going to solve his problems. He needed more than just food. He needed a way out of this mess. He needed help, and he needed it fast. Later that night, Jaden found himself standing in front of a grocery store. He could see the shelves full of food, fruits, vegetables, bread, meat, all the things he used to take for granted. His hands clenched into fists. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt full. It felt like a lifetime ago. The cold air nipped at his skin, but his focus was on the food inside. He didn't know what else to do. His options were running out. He glanced around to make sure no one was looking. The street was quiet, just a few people passing by, unaware of the hungry boy standing outside the store. Then, without thinking, he pushed the door open. Inside, he walked quickly to the bread section, grabbed a loaf, and tucked it under his arm. He didn't look at the other items. He knew it wasn't right to steal, but his stomach twisted in pain, and his mind screamed for him to act fast. Jaden turned to leave, but just as he stepped toward the door, he felt a hand grab his arm. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" a voice said. Jaden froze. He didn't want to get caught, didn't want to face the consequences, but he had no choice. He was hungry. He needed food, and the world had turned its back on him. The security guard stood there, looking down at him. Jaden's heart pounded in his chest. "Come with me," the guard ordered. Jaden didn't resist. He had already lost everything. One more mistake wouldn't make a difference. Jaden's heart pounded as the security guard pulled him through the store. He didn't fight back. There was no point in running. He had nowhere to go. His feet dragged as he followed the guard, who led him to the small office at the back of the store. The door shut behind them with a loud click. "Sit down," the guard said, pointing to a chair in front of a desk. Jaden didn't move at first. His stomach was still hurting from hunger, but now something else was twisting inside him. Fear, embarrassment, anger. He slowly sat down, keeping his eyes on the floor. He didn't want to look at the guard or the camera that watched him from above. The store manager came in a few minutes later. She was a tall woman with short, black hair and a serious face. She didn't say a word at first. Instead, she just stared at Jaden as if he were nothing more than a problem to solve. "You know what you did, right?" she asked, her voice cold. Jaden nodded slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "I took bread." The manager crossed her arms. "Why? Are you that desperate?" Jaden's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her everything. How he had no family, how his mother had died, how he was left alone in a world that didn't care about him. But he didn't. He just stared at the floor. "Do you think you can just steal whenever you're hungry?" she asked again, her voice rising. "People work hard for their money. You can't just take from others because you're starving." Jaden's heart sank. He knew what was coming next. He had been in trouble before, but this was different. He didn't belong in this store. He didn't belong anywhere. Just as the manager opened her mouth to say more, a group of people walked into the back room. They were laughing, talking, and carrying bags of food. It was the same crowd that had been shopping in the store earlier. Jaden recognized a few faces, the people who had walked by him without a second glance, the ones who didn't even notice the boy who was hungry. And now, they were laughing. They didn't know Jaden's story. They didn't know the pain he carried. They didn't know how hard it was just to get by. But they were laughing. One woman, dressed in a fancy coat, looked at Jaden and snickered. "What's this?" The little thief caught red-handed. Her friends laughed too. They were all enjoying the moment, enjoying watching a scared boy get caught. Jaden wanted to shout, wanted to scream at them, but he didn't. Instead, he sat there, feeling smaller and smaller with every laugh. "Do you know how many people would love to have that bread you took?" Another person said. "How dare you steal like that?" Jaden wanted to disappear. He wanted to run out of that room, out of the store, and never look back. But the laughter echoed in his ears, like a sharp sting, and he couldn't move. His body felt like it was glued to the chair. He had stolen, yes, but he hadn't done it out of greed. He had done it because he was hungry. And yet, here he was, being treated like he was the villain. But what hurt the most wasn't the words they were saying. It was the way they saw him. A little boy, desperate, alone, a thief. Finally, the manager spoke again, her voice sharper than before. "You're lucky we're not calling the police," she said, her eyes cold. "But you're banned from this store. I don't want to see you here again." Jaden didn't respond. He stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room on him. The laughter was still in the air, but it didn't matter anymore. It felt like it was coming from far away, as if it wasn't meant for him, as if he didn't matter. Without saying another word, Jaden turned and walked out of the store. The cool night air hit him as he stepped outside, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. He had nothing. No family. No home. No food. The world seemed like a place that didn't care. The laughter from the store still echoed in his ears, but there was something else too. A small spark of anger began to grow inside him. He wasn't just a thief. He wasn't just a boy without a future. He was someone who had survived all this time, someone who refused to give up. And as Jaden walked down the street, he made a decision. No matter what happened, he wasn't going to let the world break him. The next morning, Jaden sat on the cold bench outside the courtroom. His hands were shaking, but not from the cold. He was scared, really scared. After the store incident, the police had taken him in. They didn't yell at him. They didn't even ask too many questions, but they told him he had to go to court. He was just a kid, but the law didn't always care about age. Now he was waiting to see the judge. A man in a suit walked past and looked at Jaden with cold eyes. Another woman whispered to someone nearby, pointing at the boy on the bench. Jaden kept his eyes down. His stomach growled again, but he didn't care. He was used to being hungry now. What he wasn't used to was being treated like a criminal. A kind voice called his name, Jaden. He looked up. It was a lady with soft eyes and a warm smile. She was the court-appointed lawyer. Her name was Miss Bailey. She had met him only once, but had treated him better than most adults ever had. "It's time," she said gently. Jaden stood up slowly. His legs felt weak, but he followed her down the long hallway toward the courtroom. Inside, the room was big and quiet. There were people sitting in rows, watching. Some were strangers, some were police, and at the front sat the judge, a tall man with white hair and sharp eyes. Jaden felt small. He sat down beside Miss Bailey, who leaned over and whispered, "Don't be scared. Just tell the truth if they ask you anything. I'll speak for you, okay?" He nodded. The judge looked at the papers in front of him, then glanced up. His voice was deep. "Jaden Green, you are here today for stealing from a local grocery store. Is that correct?" Jaden stayed quiet. Ms. Bailey stood up. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "Jaden is a 13-year-old boy who recently lost his mother. He has no home, no support, and was starving. He didn't steal out of greed. He stole because he was desperate." Some people in the courtroom scoffed. Jaden heard whispers. "Still a thief. Should have known better." But then something happened. The judge looked closely at Jaden. "Son, do you have anything to say for yourself?" Jaden looked at Ms. Bailey, then slowly stood up. His knees were shaking. His heart beat so loud he thought everyone could hear it. He looked around the room, at the people staring, judging him. Then he opened his mouth. "I didn't want to steal," he said, his voice soft but clear. "I was hungry. I was cold. My mom, she died last month. She was all I had." The room went quiet. Jaden took a deep breath. His voice grew stronger. "I didn't take meat or sweets or money. I only took a loaf of bread. I sat in a park alone for days. No one helped. No one even asked if I was okay. People walked past, like I was invisible. Now, people were listening, really listening." Jaden looked at the judge. "I know stealing is wrong, but what do you do when you're just a kid, and nobody cares if you live or die?" Silence. The judge leaned back in his chair. His face had changed. His eyes were not cold anymore. They looked heavy, like he had just heard something he wasn't expecting. Jaden sat down slowly. Everyone in the room was still. The judge picked up his pen, then stopped. He didn't write anything. He just looked at Jaden for a long time. Finally, he said, "This court is going to need a moment." Then he stood up and left the room, quietly, without saying another word. The courtroom was frozen. The courtroom door slowly closed behind the judge. Everyone inside remained silent. Jaden sat still, confused. Why did the judge leave like that? Did he do something wrong? Even Ms. Bailey looked surprised. She leaned toward Jaden and whispered, "Don't worry. Just stay calm." Outside the courtroom, the judge walked down the hall slowly. His face was pale. He wasn't angry. He was shaken. Jaden's words kept repeating in his head. "What do you do when you're just a kid, and nobody cares if you live or die?" Those words had touched something deep inside him, because many years ago, he had been that kid too. The judge's name was Thomas Wells. Long before he wore a black robe, long before people called him Your Honor, he had grown up in the same kind of pain. A small, hungry boy from a poor neighborhood. A boy who watched his mother work 3 jobs just to buy rice and milk. A boy who sometimes went to sleep with an empty stomach and a tear-stained pillow. He remembered the cold nights, the broken heater, the bullies at school who laughed at his shoes, the way people ignored him because of the color of his skin. He remembered a day when his little brother had stolen an apple from a market, and how the shopkeeper slapped him so hard he fell to the ground. That day, Thomas had promised himself, "One day, I'll be powerful. One day, no one will treat us like this again." But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten. Sitting in his private chambers, Judge Wells took off his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. He looked out the window, seeing the city far below. "I became the system," he whispered to himself. The same system that once turned its back on me. He couldn't shake Jaden's face from his mind. That scared boy with eyes full of hurt. Not anger, just pain. He reached for an old photo frame on his desk. It was a picture of his younger self, barefoot, standing beside his mother in front of a small apartment. That photo had always reminded him where he came from, but he hadn't looked at it in years. Now he stared at it. "I know that boy," he whispered again. "I was that boy." He stood up, fixed his robe, and made his way back to the courtroom. Inside, people looked up as the door opened. Everyone expected a final sentence, maybe jail time, maybe a warning, but no one expected what happened next. The judge sat down quietly, looked straight at Jaden, and spoke gently. "Jaden," he said, "you reminded me today of something I had forgotten, of someone I once was." Whispers spread in the room. The judge continued, "What you did was wrong, but not because you are bad. You're not a criminal. You're a child who needed help, and no one gave it." Jaden blinked. He didn't understand what was happening. "I won't punish you," the judge said. "Instead, I will help you." A small gasp came from the crowd. Judge Wells looked at Ms. Bailey. "Find him a safe place to stay. I will personally make sure he has food, clothes, and a future." The entire courtroom fell silent. Then something even more unexpected happened. The judge stood up, walked down from his bench, and came right up to Jaden. He knelt, looked him in the eyes, and softly said, "You're not invisible anymore." Jaden's lips trembled. For the first time in weeks, someone had looked at him not like a thief, but like a human. He couldn't speak. He just nodded, eyes filled with tears. The same people who laughed at him yesterday now watched in silence, ashamed. And deep down, they knew. They had witnessed something powerful, something bigger than a trial. They had seen truth break through pride, and a child's voice awaken a judge's heart. The courtroom slowly emptied, but Jaden stayed in his seat, too shocked to move. What just happened didn't feel real. A judge, someone powerful, had stood up for him. Not because he had money or family, but because he told the truth. Ms. Bailey sat beside him, smiling gently. "You did something today most people can't do, Jaden," she said softly. "You made people listen." He looked up at her, confused. "But I'm just a kid. No one ever listens to me." "Not anymore," she replied. "Now, they will." Later that evening, Jaden sat in the back seat of a clean car, staring out the window. Ms. Bailey was driving him to a new place, a warm group home run by kind people. It wasn't forever, but it was a start. He would have a bed, food, and people who cared. And something even more surprising. Judge Wells had given his personal number to the home manager. "If Jaden needs anything," the judge had said, "you call me directly." Jaden never thought someone like a judge would care about someone like him. At the group home, Jaden was given a warm meal. The soft bed felt strange at first, too comfortable, too safe. He stared at the ceiling for hours, thinking about everything. He missed his mom so much. He wished she was there to see what had happened, to see that her boy, though scared and alone, stood up and made a difference. The next day, Judge Wells came to visit. Jaden was nervous at first, but the judge smiled warmly. He wasn't in his robe now, just normal clothes like any other man. They sat outside on a bench. "You spoke with courage," the judge said, "more than many adults ever do. You reminded me why I became a judge in the first place." Jaden looked down. "I didn't mean to cry in court." The judge chuckled. "Crying isn't weakness, Jaden. It's truth, and truth moves people." Then he handed Jaden a small notebook. "Write your story in here. Write every pain, every thought, every dream. One day, you'll look back and see how far you've come." Jaden opened the notebook and smiled. On the first page, Judge Wells had written one sentence: "Your voice matters." Weeks passed. Jaden started going to school again. He made a few friends. He still had tough days, moments when the world felt heavy. But now he had people to talk to. Teachers who helped, a lawyer who checked on him, and a judge who believed in him. One afternoon, during a school writing contest, Jaden stood in front of the class and read a short piece from his notebook. He spoke about pain, hunger, being invisible, but also about courage, kindness, and the day a courtroom changed everything. When he finished, the classroom clapped. A few kids even cried. No one laughed. And Jaden realized something. The boy who once stole bread to survive now gave others hope with his words. He wasn't just the poor kid anymore. He was Jaden Green, a fighter, a voice, a new beginning. Months passed. Jaden was no longer just that boy from the courtroom. People started talking about him in schools, homes, and even news channels. His story had spread. A young black boy, poor and scared, had stood up in court and spoken the truth so powerfully that it changed the heart of a judge. Many people had watched the courtroom video. It had gone viral on social media. Thousands commented. Some said, "He speaks for so many of us." Others said, "He reminded us we must listen better." Jaden didn't fully understand why his words touched the world, but he was happy. Not because he was famous, but because people were finally listening to kids like him. Judge Wells started a new program, Second Voice, to support children in the system. It helped kids with no parents, kids who had been ignored, and kids like Jaden. And guess who he chose to speak at the opening ceremony? Jaden. He stood in front of a large room, wearing a clean shirt, holding a small speech in his hand. His hand shook at first, but then he remembered what the judge once said, "Your voice matters." He began. "I was hungry. I was scared. I felt like no one cared. But someone finally did. That gave me the strength to speak. And now, I want other kids to know, you're not alone." The room clapped. Some wiped tears. Many stood to their feet. That day, Jaden became more than a survivor. He became a symbol of hope. He kept writing in his notebook. One day, he said, he would turn his story into a book to help others like him. Sometimes he still missed his mother, but now he believed she would be proud, because her son had changed lives. Not with anger, not with money, but with truth, tears, and a voice that refused to stay silent.